We are going to cover how to use custom validation in JavaScript. I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, but when you do your HTML5 validation, the messages are not uniform looking. And by validating in JavaScript, we can make the messages look the same. And in order to do that, we need to make some modifications to the HTML file. The first modification is going to be to add error display tags below the input areas. So we want below first name, we want the error to display below last name, below email, below telephone number. And that is what the span tags are for. So you'll notice that within a paragraph, we have our label, we got our input element, and then we've got our span tag, which is where the error is going to display. And we have a line break so that it'll go on to the next line. Then in the form element, we include a no validate attribute, and that tells the browser not to use the HTML5 form validation. So we basically add that, and then we put in the line breaks and the span tags for the error. And you'll notice that we have unique IDs for each error. So those are the modifications you need to make to your HTML. And you can see that I have made those modifications here. Okay, so I got no validate, and I do have HTML5 validation in here. You can see I've got autofocus and I've got required. So I didn't remove that validation. I just included no validate up at the top. Okay, then for my JavaScript file, the first thing that you need to do, and this is super important, is in the event handler. So when they click on the button to submit, okay, in the event handler, make sure you pass the event object, and then you use it to call prevent default. Because what happens by default when you submit a form is it wipes out all of the information that they've already entered. And we don't want that to happen if there's an error, right? If they've correctly entered some of the form data, we certainly don't want to make them re-enter it, because that's kind of punishing them for making a mistake. Okay, so prevent default will let their original entries remain there, and then they can just fix whatever the error message is telling them to fix. So prevent default is super important. Then we are going to blank out areas in the form that display the error message. And that's because they're submitting, right? So if they did have an error, okay, and so let's say they've got this error and now they've keyed it in and they're submitting. Well, that needs to get blanked out. Okay, so that's what this section of code is doing. It's looking at each error area, those span areas, and it's just blanking them out. Okay, then the next thing it's going to do is it's going to retrieve what they've entered and store it in a variable. Okay, and we can actually look at the code. Okay, so you can kind of see it's in the exact order that I'm describing it. So we've got prevent default, we're blanking out the error messages, and we're storing all the data. Then we're also creating what I call an error flag. And this is like a state variable, which indicates if there's an error or not. So initializing that to n or no means we have no errors. And so if we get down to the bottom and it's still set to N, that means there are no problems. We can add the data to local storage and we can redirect to the confirmation page. Okay, but as we go through the validation, if there is a problem, the error flag gets set to yes. So then we do not save to local storage and we do not redirect the page. So as far as the validation goes, we're checking to see if first name is blank because it is required. And so if it is a blank, then you'll notice here that we're using get element by ID and we're targeting first error. First error is that span. So it's going to be putting it right here. Okay, and that's why when I didn't fill in the first name and I submitted, you saw the error right there. Okay, so that's what this is doing. Okay, and then we set the error flag. And this is a very long nested if else because it checks the first name. If there's an error there, well, we're not going to go forward. They might as well fix it. So then they fix that and submit. Okay, so let me fix it. And now I'm going to submit. Oops, now I got a problem there. So now this one is okay. So now I'm checking last name. Okay, so now there's a problem with last name. We display the error message, turn on the flag. Okay, and now let's fix that. And we'll submit. Okay, and so now it's saying, oh, got to fill in area code and phone number. So we've gotten down to this point. Area code is not filled in. So it's telling us to fill both in. So I'm going to just fill in area code. Okay, and now it's smart enough to tell me that I got to fill in the rest. Okay, so where's that coming from? Well, we got through all of this, and now we're at this point. Yeah, so if the phone portion is a blank or it's less than 8, okay, then it's going to give us the error message. And so let's key it in correctly, or it's actually not going to be a real number, but they don't need to know that. And we'll submit. And now it's telling me email. Okay, so here it's checking email. Now I could reorder this so it's in the same order as the form. But for some reason I have it in this order, which I'm just going to leave it in. Anyway, so it's checking for the email. It's checking to see if it's filled in, but it's also checking to make sure the @ sign is at the correct location. It's checking the number of characters before and after the @ sign to make sure that it's formatted somewhat correctly, because you can get by these checks by putting in a bogus email that is formatted correctly, because that does not exist, but it will accept it. Okay, so what it doesn't like is if I didn't do a period and I did a comma, or I didn't have enough characters on either side. That's the type of thing that it is checking for. Okay, so it's looking for the @ sign where that is positioned. It's looking where the dot is positioned. And so if the @ sign is positioned less than 1, well, that's a problem because there's nothing in front of it. So if the dot position is less than the @ position plus 2, that's a problem. Okay, it's a problem with the length. So that's all this is checking. Okay, but it can't, tap the address and make sure it's right. But at least it can tell you if, it's valid or not based on these limited rules. And I will tell you, jQuery, the plugin has the same limited rules. It's just that you don't have to code them. Okay, so after we get through, and it should not take this, yep, because I have the comma, so I'm going to put the period in. It will take this even though it's bogus. Okay, it does do the redirect. So that's basically how you set up this form. Okay, and you are validating strictly through JavaScript, and it's not using any of the HTML5 attribute validation.